You want to set the frame that this is a relationship of mutual responsibility. And if you start doing more work, like, yes, maybe you get them on the phone and then you get them to your office, but maybe then that's the appointment they miss. Or maybe like they're not really engaged and they're just showing up and like they're not following your treatment recommendations. There's a concept, don't water someone else's lawn. So I won't go into the whole like metaphor of it, but it's essentially like you got to move your sprinklers so they're not watering someone else's lawn. You're basically watering someone else's lawn and then you're going to your neighbor being like, you really need to water your own lawn. I really mean it this time. I'm serious. And like they're like, yeah, sure, but your actions are saying you're gonna keep doing it.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for just all of the kind of motivational stuff that you just said. That's super helpful. And one thing that I've been really struggling with lately is that I'm kind of having a lot of fatigue around people being flaky. Like I'll have clients that are either trying to schedule, potentially new clients that are trying to schedule an initial consultation, but then I also have clients that I'm already working with that we're just trying to schedule either their therapy or their follow-up, and people are so hard to get a hold of these days. You know, it's almost like no one ever answers the phone, and so you have to then either, text, or even, sometimes I'm sending messages through the patient portal, texting and calling, and I'm just getting really fatigued. And that kind of, like where you were talking about the doubt and giving up, I'm not giving up, but I'm kind of wondering a little bit like, how am I going to deal with this level of just feeling fatigued and frustrated and kind of wanting to be done with calling some of these people?
Totally. So my question is, why are you calling them? Why are you not just waiting for them to reach out to you or not?
I guess because in my mind, when people have mental health issues, a lot of the time it's really difficult to motivate to make that call. And so, and when I do get a hold of people, I'm able to actually schedule them. And so I don't know why it's been particularly difficult. I don't know if we're in like Mercury retrograde right now or something, but it's like the last couple of weeks have been especially challenging. But yeah, do you not advise doing that?
I don't. Let me explain why. Is because, I mean, with maybe some certain caveats, like a severely depressed patient or someone who's like going through a psychotic break and you need to, check in with them. But otherwise, you want to set the frame that this is a relationship of mutual responsibility. And if you start doing more work, like, yes, maybe you get them on the phone and then you get them to your office, but maybe then that's the appointment they miss. Or maybe like they're not really engaged and they're just showing up and like they're not following your treatment recommendations. There's a concept, don't water someone else's lawn. So I won't go into the whole like metaphor of it, but it's essentially like you got to move your sprinklers so they're not watering someone else's lawn. You're basically watering someone else's lawn and then you're going to your neighbor being like, you really need to water your own lawn. I really mean it this time. I'm serious. And like they're like, yeah, sure, but your actions are saying you're gonna keep doing it. So what I do, I don't chase patients. If patients don't follow up with me, I just let them not. And then what usually happens is I'll get pinged for a medication refill. Usually at that point, I'll send them a message, say like, hey, I got pinged for med refill, but I haven't seen you in a while. I just sent a 1 month supply. Here's my scheduling link. Make sure to schedule before you run out because I need to see you before I provide you any more refills. And then they schedule or they don't, and I don't provide any more refills. And trust me, then they'll realize I was serious. They're like, oh, can't I just get one? No. Then they schedule. Then I've set a frame that I'm serious. You show up, like if you want me to treat you, you have to take this process seriously. And then it's better for them. Like, cause you don't want patients that are like one toe in. Trust me, you're setting yourself up for so many challenges, like to get them to be compliant with every step of the way, taking the medication, taking the supplement, getting the labs that you order and stuff like that. You just want them to be accountable for like doing all that stuff. Let the patient have the consequence. I don't mean the consequence is a punishment. A consequence is just a consequence, which is maybe they don't feel good and then they're like, wait, I actually do need help, and they reach out. Or maybe they decide, I don't need this treatment, I don't want this treatment, and they do something else. And that's fine too, but they make a decision and they take responsibility for the consequence of that decision. I think the word boundaries, setting boundaries, can sometimes feel like it has a negative connotation, like it's punitive or like, I'm going to set boundaries with this person. I find it is like a sign of respect. I respect you enough, I'm going to hold you to a higher standard. Like, you can do this. None of this nonsense you're doing. Like you are capable of doing this, so let's do this. And I think people rise to the occasion. They can appreciate that tough love because for me, sincerely, it comes from a place of like, I know you're capable of this, so I'm gonna hold you to that expectation rather than, yeah, you're so incompetent, I'm just not gonna expect anything from you, you know?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then certainly there's just the exhaustion that I've been feeling. It has to do so much with the balance in that relationship, which I was aware of. But,
No, totally.
but this is really good advice as well. So yeah, thank you for that.
So I'm curious what happened with these patients. Okay, so patient one, when you say dropped out halfway through the session, you mean you were on a Zoom call and they like disappeared in the middle, or what happened?
It was this gentleman. I suspect that he may have had some schizophrenia-like traits, and because he had told me he had a history of multiple antipsychotics, and so his like mental status exam was kind of his speech was vague, his thought process seemed a little slow. But anyway, point is that he dropped out in the middle of the session, and he'd given me credit card information and everything, and then after that became completely unresponsive to any like texts, phone calls, follow-ups, etc. And so went to bill the gentleman because we had had over half the session. And so it turns out that his credit card had insufficient funds.
I know you asked this later, like billing before and after. I bill before. Now, there are various ways to do it, and to some extent, it's a personal preference. If you wanted to be like as sure as possible you were going to get paid, you set it to bill 24 hours before the session or whenever your cancellation policy is. Like if it's 40, they have to cancel and reschedule 48 hours, then that's when you bill, or 24 hours. To me, that's personally like a little too strict for me. What I do is I have it bill an hour before, or it's either an hour or 8 hours, some period before, where then by the time I log on for the call, I see if it went through or not. And then at the beginning, I mean, really at this point, I don't have issues with patients not paying. So maybe at the end of the call, I'll just be like, hey, your card didn't go through, make sure to talk to my assistant, or like, I'll just get it on the call really quick. It's usually just a matter of, for me, when it happens, there was a fraud warning for their card, so they had to get a new one. But essentially what you're wondering is for those flaky patients who they're just acting a little sketchy, and how do you make sure you get paid? I would bill beforehand. So I'd have it like auto bill maybe an hour beforehand, or just so like they don't, they're not going to get like a bill in advance and like get worried or something. Because sometimes patients see the bill in advance like, wait, did I miss my appointment? I don't understand. So just enough so that they're not going to like freak out if they get a notification, but it gives you time so that when you log in for the appointment, if it didn't go through, take care of that first. Like, oh, hey, by the way, I noticed I had an issue with your credit card. Let's just get that sorted out, like right now. Is there a different card you want me to use? And they may be a little caught off guard that you're asking at that moment, but just act like it's casual and just get it done. And then, like, I have patients that I know they will eventually pay, but they just get kind of lazy. Their card always is declined, insufficient funds. They don't manage their money well. And then my assistant's like following up. And so what I started just doing is doing it that way. And that it basically ended that happening because she realized I was serious. Like, I'm getting this money today. And so now there's money in the account and everything. So I have no idea why that person just disappeared. That's like a really strange thing that's never happened. But I would, just as a matter of habit, get payment in advance. Now, there'll be times when, like, let's say you go to build the card, it doesn't go through, and then the patient never shows and you never see them again. That money's just not collectible. Like, you just give up. You lost that, whatever, couple $100. There's no point in trying to, like, go after it. But that's not going to happen that often. You're probably figuring out, like, who your ideal patients are, figuring out, like, your screening processes, and figuring out how to set the frame. So, does that make sense? Do you have any questions about that?
Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like it's the best practice just to charge them before.
Yeah. So your question is, those with licenses to practice in multiple states, how do you market? How does it help or not help with getting patients? And do you recommend it? And so you need to add 2 more states. When you say need to add 2 more states, what do you mean? You mean want to add 2 more states, or is there some reason, like, is Massachusetts not an independent practice state, or?
Oh, no, it is an independent practice state. It's just for program because they aren't going to have many clinical sites. I have to add 2 more states. It's kind of like we're the Western Europe, I think, of America. We're near so many states.
Yes,
So
totally.
like,
That's very true. You are.
It's not going to take very long to get New Hampshire or Rhode Island. So I'm just adding 2 more. And then I was like, oh, I might have to do 2 more. And then I was thinking about the people that have been ringing the bell, which have been so inspiring. And many of them I notice are either from really large states. And I'm not saying that's the reason for their success. Clearly, it's their competence. But also, I notice not just people from large states, but also from multiple states. And I'm wondering, oh, did they feel like that helped them having multiple states? Since I'm doing this for a program, should I also try and market my private practice since I'll be licensed in theory in these 5 states instead of just listing only Massachusetts for my practice?
Yeah, I hear you. So you already have to, for your job, be licensed in multiple states. And you're wondering strategically, does it make sense to market yourself in multiple states? So let me give you my short version of my answer that I've given before, but then I also want to open it up, and I'm curious if other people, what their personal experience. I think Northeast is one of these places where it makes sense to be in multiple states, especially if you're on a border. But I would say generally, I don't recommend having a practice building plan that's dependent on being licensed in multiple states. The reason is that, first of all, it's a little bit of work to maintain your licensure and your DEA or whatever in multiple states. For you, Charlene, you have to do it anyway because of a job, so it's not extra work. But you still have to think about things like having a virtual address in each state and making sure you're following every state's rules and stuff. The other thing, too, is that there's enough patients in any state to fill your practice. Right? And so my recommendation is usually to just go deep in a single state, go deep with your marketing efforts, maybe position yourself as an expert or something so you can pull from a larger geographic area, as opposed to just kind of having to market effectively in multiple states, because then you have to kind of have local networks in multiple states when it comes to if that patient needs IOP or that patient needs a therapist, you have to kind of research that, or they need TMS. This isn't an insurmountable hurdle, but you're kind of trying to figure that out in multiple states. So anyway, typically, unless there's a really good reason to do it geographically, like people tend to be very close by, then maybe you're doing 2-3 states, but not more than that. But I'm just curious, is there someone here who is licensed in multiple states and it's been really good for their practice? Or someone who has maybe a contrasting opinion or experience?
I don't have a contrasting experience, but I know of somebody who is a therapist who specializes in sexual health. And she's in like 7, 10, whatever states. And I think that kind of thing, when you've got this niche that really you don't maybe want somebody in your own state, if you're a professional, whatever, like there might be reasons to have somebody even out of state for that reason. I don't know.
I think that's true. I think I would also say if you're such a specialist in a narrow area, then there's going to be other people in other states who will probably want to see you. And otherwise you would just have to tell them no, but maybe it's strategic to get licensed in other major populous states. Like Agam, for example, who's here, and he's in New York, which is already a massive state, but maybe at some point when his practice is growing and he's got like his blog posts are bringing in potential patients, maybe he's considering Florida or Texas or other big states, California, where he might just happen to be getting direct outreach of patients from those places. So Charlene, you're in Massachusetts. What other states are you considering if you were to market it in multiple states would you be doing?
New Hampshire, New York, partially because my other job, we have a lot of patients that are New York City and Bostonians are sisters, whether or not they want to admit it out loud or not. So we have a lot of patients that go back and forth. So that partly makes it easier to get licensed there because the whole prescription issue that we've had before with COVID. And then the others 2 are DC and Maryland. So New Hampshire, New York, and DC and Maryland. I
mean, I do think all of those states do logically make sense. I would just say maybe start with adding one at a time and testing it and being like, is this working? Is it worth the effort? And then if it is working and it's not too much extra work, maybe then you add on another one, but do it in a stepwise way rather than just adding 5 states all at once.